Vice President Kamala Harris was in Detroit for her second stop on the Economic Opportunity Tour. She was there to promote the Biden administration's economic agenda. She made a huge economic announcement that will boost small Black business owners. But before Harris took to the stage, several people, including Michigan's Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, took the time to brag about the opportunities Detroit offers.
On behalf of my partner in public service, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, I am so proud to welcome all of you to the historic Charles H. Wright Museum and to welcome the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, here to Detroit, Michigan. Now, she's joined here on this visit and this important set of conversations around the country about economic opportunity and agenda that works for everyone. That's something that we understand here in Michigan, especially in the city of Detroit, a city that has historically defined wealth creation for the Black community here in America. You see, there are so many people around the country who, when they came to Detroit for the first time, it was the first time they saw Black folks or people of color who had money. Y'all know I'm right, please come know yourself. We know how to show ours off a little differently than everybody else. But what underlies that is the fact that people saw a path to progress here in Detroit, Michigan. Whether you were families who came as part of the Great Migration like my own, or whether you were entrepreneurs who were so enterprising that discrimination couldn't keep you out of your dreams, whether you were people who were part of the labor movement born here in the state of Michigan that worked to provide a future for their family the way that they could see fit, where they were respected and protected in the workplace. They knew that Detroit and Michigan was a land of opportunity.
Dr. Malveaux, as the economist, as somebody who's been putting in this work for so long, dealing with these issues, can you share your thoughts, number one, about this economic opportunity program that Vice President Harris is leading, and just the overall message that people are not getting as it relates to the Biden agenda, as it relates to economic policy overall?
You know, the Biden-Harris administration has done really a brilliant job in drilling down on what is needed in the African-American community. They focus on entrepreneurship. They focus on employment. They focus on HBCUs. All of these things are pivotal. And the brother, I just adore him, the lieutenant governor from Michigan, who talks about Detroit, talks about what Biden talks about. The role that unions play. You see, you did not have to have a college degree or even a high school diploma to be middle class in Detroit. You had to have a good union job. People 20 years ago with overtime were making over 100K as an auto worker. You know, they had seniority in this and this and this, but basically those were basic jobs. And those are the kind of jobs with the infrastructure program that President Biden is trying to encourage. If we're able to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge over there in Baltimore, those are union jobs. You know, Obakongo, you know this as well as I do. The minimum wage at $7.25 an hour is an insult.
That's right.
Now, it's not, you know, half of the states don't have it. Many states, D.C., you know, we're 17 and change, California 20. But by and large, if you're in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Colorado, those old Confederate states, they're making very little money. So I do not understand. And then you look at the program, it's a brilliant program, and it speaks to us. This is really what Vice President is doing is really good, because my basic criticism of the Biden-Harris administration is they don't toot their own horn. They don't say enough about what they're doing. And if they don't say enough about what they're doing, people don't know. So then you get these MAGA heads and these disaffected Negroes who run the MAGA head game. Listen to what your HBCU got. Listen to what minority business are getting. Listen, pay attention. So I'm excited about the tour. I'm happy that she's out there. I hope she continues this as long as she can.
I hear you, but Gavin, you know, I'm up this morning. I, like all of us here, consuming news all day, 6, 7 a.m., taking in the news, hour after hour, getting reports. I didn't see this. hour after hour, back to back, Trump stuff, trials, ceasefire this, and other conversations. Sometimes, Gavin, I am watching the news and I am forgetting who was the president of the United States.
Hello.
How are you seeing the fact that this type of story is not getting the type of coverage it deserves?
So you hit the nail on the head. I think right now we're in this media climate in which the controversy, the juicy, the salacious, that's what sells. So you take the former president, a hush money trial involving a sex scandal, and that same person is running for president again. That's the perfect storm of what the news media, of what cable media wants to cover. We also know, though, that the way we consume media, especially young people, is changing. A lot of people are going onto social media more these days, getting their news from Snapchat, I think, if that's still a thing.
Yeah.
Snapchat and TikTok and all these other news sources, right? And even more so on social media are those juicy rumors, the, Drake, Kendrick, like all of that feud. That's what people are talking about. I think it's a darn shame that the real substance of the issues are getting lost in all of that, right? And what's interesting is that when I talk to people, I mentioned to them that, I used to work for the vice president. A lot of them, and the media seems to think that there's a lot of negativity around the VP, and that might be true for some people. But what I hear from most people is that they like the VP. They just feel like they don't really see her enough. They feel like they don't really know her. And what I hear from a lot of them is that they want to see more of the VP. That's why I think I'm so excited that the vice president is hitting the road. She is such an effective messenger on the issue of reproductive freedom. We've seen her travel this country on her Fight for Reproductive Freedoms tour, speaking truth to power on that issue, and now on this economic opportunity tour. And I was extremely happy that she started this tour in my hometown of Atlanta, and I'm excited for this tour to continue to progress. But I think it's on the media to make sure that they lift up this work, because the whole point of this tour, the whole point when it comes to connecting with Black folks on the ground is so that we can close the knowledge gap that exists between the amazing work, the historic work that this administration is doing, investing in small businesses and bringing the rate of small business growth among the Black community to its fastest rate in decades, adding a record number of jobs, bringing Black unemployment down to record lows, raising wages, lowering the cost of insulin and prescription drugs for seniors, lowering the cost of childcare, taking historic actions to forgive student loans. This is incredible, incredible, life-changing, generational altering work. But the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of people on the ground who just aren't tracking. And so it really, I urge in the strongest terms, the media to cover this work, right? I think a lot of people, like I said earlier, are still very checked out on these issues, are checked out on the election. It's still a little bit a ways away. People are going to wake up soon, but it's important that between now and then that the campaign, that the administration continues to deploy their strongest messengers. And to me, that includes the vice president, to lift up so much of this work, to educate, to connect with, first of all, especially our Black voters, and then educate them on this work and convey to them that they want to build on that work. They want to build on the work I just mentioned. They want to work at issues like making housing more affordable, right? Continuing to lower costs. And so I think this is the kind of meaningful engagement, education, and activation that a lot of us were looking for from the ticket. And I'm excited for them to continue on with it. And I'm excited for the VP to continue traveling this country to lift up this really amazing work.
Absolutely. And Don Graves Jr., Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Economic Opportunities, also spoke.
Yes.
Economic empowerment, economic opportunity is personal for me, not only as a fellow Midwesterner, but as someone who's been on the ground in this city, helping to turn despair and disaster into hope and healing. During the Obama-Biden administration, after years of underinvestment and disinvestment, and after the Great Recession had swept through Detroit and the rest of the country, leaving the city in bankruptcy, I was asked by President Obama and then Vice President Biden to be their point person on the recovery of Detroit. It was some of the hardest but most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. And I don't need to remind folks in this community of the challenges that you faced, but together with the mayor, with local elected leaders, with the community, with stakeholders all across this region, we worked together. The community came together focused on rebuilding the city infrastructure, city services, creating a new economic development strategy focused on creating quality jobs, investment opportunities all across this community, even where Wall Street wasn't able to find them. And even during such a challenging period, Detroiters never buckled. Together, you all, with our support, drew up a roadmap to recovery, a recovery I think we can all now confidently call the Detroit Renaissance. Today, we're in the middle of an increasingly competitive global economic environment with ever more aggressive competitors and adversaries. And under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, we're making historic investments in Detroit, in Michigan, and all across the country that aren't just righting this ship, righting our economy, but they're positioning this country for generational economic opportunities for all Americans, not just some, but all Americans.
Dr. Malvo, as Graves was speaking, I wrote down something he said. He said, hope and healing. And when I heard that, it made me think about the fact that they are starting this program, they're launching it, as Gavin said, in his hometown of Atlanta, and going to cities with large Black populations that have felt that they have not really been part of the economic system in America. As they kick off this tour and go to these different cities, do you feel like there's real potential to reach people on the ground, kind of where they are, to really help them understand the aspects of the Biden agenda that we've been talking about and that they've been talking about in Detroit today?
Well, Omekongo, I think they have to be very vigorous in connecting the dots, because here's what's going on with folks at the bottom. You've got this thing called macroeconomic ecstasy. You keep hearing about the numbers, and the numbers are good. Unemployment rate, less than 4%, been that way for almost a year. You keep hearing that good stuff, but you're sitting here down in here on the ground. Where you're not seeing that. So you've got to connect the dots. Now, some of the things that the Biden-Harris administration are doing are great, especially for entrepreneurs. But connect the dots in your talk, and I'm sure Gavin, as a speechwriter, can do this better than me, but connect the dots so that you're talking about what entrepreneurship trickles down. So, only 3% of our nation's businesses are owned by Black people. Right. Fewer than 10% of us are entrepreneurs. So while this is good, it's great, frankly. At the same time, you're Pookie who's delivering pizza. It doesn't make a difference in your life. So what has to happen is they've got to connect the dots. They've got to connect the dots in a way that people get excited. They have to see stuff. So you've got a program, great program. You've gone to Atlanta, gone to Detroit, where there are enormous needs in Detroit. A city that's on the brink. It's coming back in some areas it's not. What needs to happen really quickly, I hope, is don't just talk about the program you're bringing, show the people some results. So in other words, we brought this program, and now John Jones Business has all this stuff that it didn't have a year ago. That's the kind of thing that people can get excited about. I think that the administration, as I say, I give them a B. I wouldn't give them an A, but then I don't give anybody an A. I'd give them a B, but I'd give them a C on communications. Now, this tour that the vice president is on gives them a possibility of an upgrade. But it has to be more, and this, with Mr. Graves, who is amazing, he's fantastic, he's done really great work, with the lieutenant governor, with so many other people surrounding her, this is good for us. We're the, commentariat. What does it mean to Pookie?
Yeah.
What does it mean to Nisha? And that's the question that they've got to answer, because this doesn't translate for the voter, unfortunately.
Well, answer the question, Gavin. You're in communications. You're a speechwriter. You're in Atlanta. You saw the kickoff. What do you feel needs to be happening after the VP leaves Atlanta, after she leaves Detroit? Is it on us to put the message out? Is it the administration needs to do more? Is it a combination of both? You're in the communications business. How do you see the way this should unfold?
So I definitely think there's a role for each segment to play. I think let's start with the administration / the campaign. They're sort of, I guess, associated together at this point in time. I think it's important that they make clear that this tour, that these stops along the tour are not just, whether it's the VP or the president coming in, making a speech and then coming out, right? The sort of in and out. I think it's important that the campaign makes clear that that's not what these engagements are about. These engagements are about actual, intentional, authentic, genuine touch points with communities that have really been left behind, that have not been engaged by political leadership over the decades. I think right now there is a lot of distrust between folks on the ground in communities like Atlanta or Detroit or you name it, and sort of the political ruling class, let's say. I think a lot of folks on the ground just don't feel like, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican as president, they don't really feel like the political machine is really like working for them or working to their benefit. I think that's why Donald Trump has been able to tap into sort of that populist political movement right now, and sort of posturing and pitching himself as being for the people and, let's just burn the whole thing down. I don't think that's the right approach. And I, in fact, think that this campaign, that the administration is showing the intentionality in their approach that they ought to. But I think it's important. And what you're seeing is that the campaign, if you're looking, of course, I keep very close tabs on this. I was connecting with the vice president's head of coalitions on the campaign recently, who's actually from Chris Scott, who is from Detroit, I believe. And so we were talking strategy, throughout the course of our meeting. But what you're seeing is that you're seeing states across the country. The campaign is building out a very robust on the ground states operation. That means that although we're looking at the vice president making a speech, in Atlanta, and then we're seeing her make a speech in Detroit, that work is, the work goes on after she leaves. You have really robust state teams who are doing the work in each and every one of these states to make sure that communities on the ground feel that engagement, even when a principal, whether it's a president or VP, even when they're not there. Right. But what you're seeing on the other side, by contrast, Donald Trump claims through all of his insulting pandering to the Black community that he wants to win the Black vote. Well, actually, what you're seeing is that his RNC, and I say his RNC because he handpicked the leaders of the RNC, including his daughter-in-law, what you're seeing is the Republican National Committee closing down the minority outreach centers.
No, you're absolutely right.
That they claimed were going to be, reaching Black and Hispanic and whatever voters. And along with doing that, they're firing the people of color who are working there.
No, you're absolutely right. And I feel like as we get to, hop into this break, you're talking about these plans. We still have yet to see a Trump economic plan. And so we're looking forward to talking more about the Biden's plan. Definitely. We're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Me, Sherry Shepard with Sammy Roman.
I'm Dr. Robin B., pharmacist and fitness coach, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
And family, now we are going to toss it over to Roland Martin, who has been traveling with the vice president talking about this economic opportunity tour. What's up, Roland?
Hey, folks, how you doing? We literally just got off of Air Force Two, returning back from Detroit with Vice President Kamala Harris, where she spoke at the Charles Wright Museum of African American History, focusing on economic empowerment, but speaking specifically of what the administration has done as it relates to African Americans. The Small Business Administration, the Commerce Department have all been involved with that. Joining me here is the Deputy Administrator, Dilawar Saeed, who's with the Small Business Administration. Glad to have you here, Roland Martin Unfiltered. One of the things that we talked about on the plane, I asked you the question about building capacity. because it's one thing to talk about small businesses. It's one thing to talk about small businesses, but it's another thing to build capacity, be able to grow those businesses. How is SBA really focused on that?
Absolutely, Roland. First of all, thanks for having me and thanks for joining us on Driving Good For It. I'm an entrepreneur, so I can tell you firsthand, having built companies, it's one thing to start a business. It takes a lot of effort and capacity building to grow the business and then eventually be able to create jobs. So we are very focused on making sure that we have access to capital, and SBA access to resources and building capacity. For the second year in a row, we crossed $1.5 billion in SBA-backed loans to African-American-owned businesses. That's a record. We still have long ways to go because we have systemic barriers that we will overcome that will get essentials for this community. But when it comes to access to finance, we are on the right path. Second, in terms of building capacity, there are 68 district offices SBA has across the nation, including in Wayne County, Detroit. Right? Today you saw our people on the ground in this resource field. The VP is bringing the whole of government, if you will, the doorsteps of our communities, right? We're doing this kind of intentional outreach across the country, not just when she shows up, but also when the rest of us travel and also locally we're doing this. And the third is we also expand our partnerships. We obviously have resource partners, but we also have a partnership with Divine Now, which has obviously a great reach in the Black community. You had Ron Busby. Chamber introduced the Vice President. Right? He represents many Black chambers across the country. Mm-hmm. We are partnering with them, making sure that folks know how to get access to resources, mentoring folks on how to get a contract, how to get in the certificate process. Once you get a contract, how do you actually get to work? And for that, there's a training that we're offering both in SBA resources, but we're also teaming up with the Department of Defense. They operate accelerators around the country. But I've personally spoken to, I'll be in Georgia a couple of weeks to talk about how you train African-American contractors so that they can actually get the work as affordable and have access to opportunities to build wealth for themselves and for their communities.
One of the things you mentioned with the 8A program, obviously, a number of programs have been under attack. The Supreme Court outlawed affirmative action in college administration admissions. You had a lawsuit in Tennessee. Then you also reported the lawsuit, the judge of the city out of Texas regarding the MDDA. So talk about the 8A program in terms of, is that still the primary avenue for many Black-owned businesses? And how is that program, how are you dealing with that federal ruling out of Tennessee?
So 8A is one of the most important procurement vehicles, if you will, for socially and economically disadvantaged entrepreneurs. That includes African Americans, that includes Asian Americans, that includes Arab Americans, anyone, it's veterans, women, and so forth, whoever has had a social disadvantage. And that is something that we know many in the Black community has faced. The program is fully open. It's up and running. In fact, it has grown this year over year. It is compliant with the court's injunction, and our teams have worked very hard to make sure that everyone is qualified. If anything, the program is growing. Look, this president cares about this community. Equities are the heart of our agenda. That obviously we are, following his leadership. So under this president, this program, we're going to do everything possible to make sure we keep programs like these that help us drive towards more equitable, more inclusive economic growth up and running. If anything, we grow. So this program, I would invite your listeners and viewers to go to certified.sba.gov and see how do you get certified to get a contractor. And we have our teams work with folks who are looking to apply for the program and see how we get into the process.
One of the things that we look at what happened during COVID. And Ron Busby spoke to this, and the president spoke to, the vice president spoke to this today. 41% of Black-owned businesses that went out of business because of COVID. And part of that's because most of Black businesses are one employee. And so how has the SBA worked trying to bring back a lot of those businesses, to bring them online to help them?
So, as we all know, COVID impacted African Americans, frankly, disproportionately. And so that's why we have to be very intentional when we think about when we're seeing growth in entrepreneurship in the Black community. We've seen 30% rise since the president took office in terms of business ownership, that we build that capacity. So it's not a solo entrepreneur, right? Frankly, often our numbers of Black-owned firms that have employees are often abysmally small in state after state. And so we have to make sure that we build capacity to, where these firms can grow. I'll give you an example. I was in Salt Lake City and I met an African-American baker. She started a business. We actually gave her a prize. She's doing very well. But she's by herself. And she told me she gets up in the morning at 5 a.m., she cleans the place, she's the baker, she's a CEO. At night, she cleans up. This is what we see story after story. So by making sure those entrepreneurs can access loans that previously, quite frankly, often were not within reach, they can probably think about working capital, investing in a team. So one of the things that we are very proud of with SBA is we have streamlined the process to apply for a small dollar loan. Not everybody needs a $400K loan. Right? You may need $20,000, $30K, or $40K, right? Or $10K. You should be able to walk into an SBA-backed bank or a regional bank and apply that loan. So we have now streamlined the process. You only provide 20 pieces of information versus, a lot of paperwork to make it simpler for you to apply for a small loan. By making that change that we did last year through our own, streamlining our process, we've seen small dollar lending go up 20% in the first quarter of fiscal year. But it is a reminder that when you have an intentional policy, right, that reflects our care for our people, you see the impact, right? Still long ways to go. To your point, so many businesses went under. They want to come back. We're seeing the resurgence coming in. But we also need to make sure they have the capacity. And the story that I shared with you, the stories are all across the country. And we need to make sure they have access to resources, access to also assistance or mentorship, that they can actually build their businesses and grow and have some scale.
A couple more questions. One, access to capital is one thing. Access to contracts is another. And I've used this example for myself. I have a small-owned business, started with 7 people, spent $350,000 of my own money. We've hit $3 million in revenue in the last 3 years. And I've been in the black. I've been profitable since March 2020. I don't need capital. I need contracts. And so that's also a barrier there in terms of being able to access those contracts. And so from a governmental standpoint, how have you been trying to clear some of that? Because under the previous administration, they bundled lots of contracts and made it harder for small business folks to apply. Now you're unbundling. But the other thing is, how are you encouraging corporations to also understand that, hey, when you provide contracts, that's also capital?
Correct. So the United States government is the world's single largest purchaser of goods and services. We spend $700 billion a year on purchasing goods and services, right? And the president made a solemn commitment, as you may know, on the 100th year anniversary of the burning of the Black Wall Street.
Yep, I was there.
Tulsa, you were there.
I was there.
And he said 15% of all of this spend will go to socially disadvantaged businesses, to black contractors.
So that's black, Latino, the women.
2025.
Got it.
Now, we did north of 12% last year. This year, the target is 13%. Next year, 15% of all this government spend. To your point, how do we make sure that once you get a contract, first you even get a contract, one of the things we're doing, and I'm personally been very involved with this, is to make sure that we direct our federal partners to make sure that they're looking at small businesses. And the rule of 2, it's a technical term, but if there are 2 or more small businesses that qualify for a good and service to provide to the federal government, we are directing the federal agencies to now give them contracts. That number is up. So, for example, this year, it's a record that 28% of the entire federal government spend went towards small businesses, because now we are intentionally directing these workers to small businesses. By the way, not just that, also making sure that you actually get the task order. You actually get the work. And that's why we're saying that if you have under 250K, those task orders will go exclusively towards small businesses. Third, let me also bring up the point of actually performing well with contracts. I've been a business owner myself. Getting a contract is only the first step. You got to succeed with it, right? So we have training. We have relaunched a training called Empower to Grow. You now get one-on-one mentorship and advice on how to succeed on a contract, how to make sure that it's a referenceable customer so that you can land more customers, more contracts in the future. So look, it's all of these things together, and it's something that SBA coordinates across the federal government. We work closely with Department of Defense, DHS, HHS, and others, and we'll keep at it.
Well, one of the things that I know specifically, we talk about black-owned media, and Congressman Eleanor Holmes Norton, Congressman Hank Johnson has been really aggressive on this, because federal government spends about $1 billion, only 1% goes to black-owned media. And so part of the problem that we have is knowing out of all of the agencies, what advertising agency controls the contracts, knowing who to call, knowing who to apply to. So a lot of the problems that we face in the general sector, corporate America, same thing happens because the same agencies control the federal government. So one of the things that I suggested to with Don Craven, who's at MBDA, I said, is if the federal government creating essentially what is his own, like a front. So let small businesses and black-owned media know, hey, here are all of the, this is who controls the ad dollars for every single department. So you know exactly who to communicate with, because frankly, it's hard to actually discover that. And you know, you're talking again, it's $1 billion spent, and only 51 million goes to all of black-owned media. So that's one of those ideas. It's helpful because frankly, it's hard knowing who controls what, who has what. So we don't know who to apply. And then all of a sudden, when you find out, oh, money's been spent, sorry, it's too late.
Well, that's why we have to do better outreach, right? And that's why we are doing this accelerated training. That's why we did what we did today in Detroit. We brought this resource fair in Metro Detroit, in downtown Detroit. And of course, we can't scale with the vice president doing it herself everywhere, but we are doing it at the agency level. I travel, our administrator travels. We bring these resources to people and say, look, this is how you navigate government. This is how you navigate agencies. Because you're right, it is challenging to navigate, right? It's a bureaucracy. But, you know, when you believe in delivering for the people and you believe in democracy, you want to bring the resources to folks. And let me tell you, Roland, there is enough resource in the United States government. Issue is lack of awareness. Right. And that is in community after community. But we have to make it an effort, intentional effort, to see them. So when the president sets up a target of 15% using it below the pulpit against the backdrop of Black Wall Street burned 100 years ago, that means something. That means that you have action plans, agency after agency, that is now required to deliver on it. Like I'm required to deliver on it, right? And so then we will do that outreach. So we're seeing it in numbers. We still have ways to go, just given historic barriers that many in our communities face.
All right. Well, look, we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you on the show, so appreciate it.
It was quite a whirlwind day. We left Washington, D.C. around 11 a.m. flying to Detroit when we, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, as she greeted several officials, including Energy Secretary, who was a former governor of Michigan. She traveled with her on this trip. In addition to, you also, of course, had the deputy number 2 at the Commerce Department. Now, Jennifer Granholm was former governor. Now, this video here is when we landed in Detroit. She was met there by the U.S. Trade Representative as well as Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, Gilchrist, and his wife as well. And so that's how the day started. Then we traveled to a black-owned restaurant in Detroit, an opportunity for the vice president, to visit with them. It's Joe Lewis's Southern Kitchen. And so it was great to be there. A lot of Black Star Network fans there as well. And so they, of course, greeted the owners of the restaurant, and Vice President had the opportunity to chat with several different people, including this little young girl right here. When she walked in, that was a huge ski-wee that went out. Her sorority sisters were there as well in the room. And so we had an opportunity to, of course, see the folks there. And she also had opportunity to speak with the owner of the restaurant to talk about Black-owned businesses and talk about what some of their issues and concerns are. Let's play some of that. Up in a second, and so that we had some audio issues when we were there, so I was recording on 2 different cameras, so we got to back up. So guys, keep playing that video there, and so we're going to just move forward. You're going to have where you're going to hear some of that conversation between the vice president and the owner of the restaurant. So let me know when we have that. So it should come up in just a second. All right, so what we do is we'll post it on social media, and we'll have that later. Now, after we left there, we then traveled to the Charles Wright Museum of African American History, where a packed room was awaiting the vice president. We already played for you some of the sound bites from various people who spoke before her, and of course we played Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. Here is the former governor of Michigan, as well as the Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm.
Since the president's agenda was passed, the Department of Energy alone has committed more than $6 billion in grants and loans benefiting Michigan. And that just pales in comparison to what the private sector is doing in Michigan between the tax credits and the grants that are happening. So in Michigan, just in the energy space, we have seen 50 companies announce that they have come or are expanding in Michigan to manufacture clean energy products. 50 companies that have said we are going to come and hire people in Michigan, hiring more than 21,000 people, $22 billion in investment, good paying jobs. Good paying jobs. You know, so as factories go up, as cranes start to appear and people wonder, can I get one of those jobs? So we are, you know, for companies, there's no shortage of a desire for talent. And for folks out here, there is no shortage of talent. So we got to connect talent and those who want to hire folks. So as of today, I just want to say applications are open for a first-of-its-kind fellowship that'll help ensure that local workers can get those jobs. The program is called Readiness Accelerator for Major Programs, or RAMP. And what it is the connective tissue between a job provider who wants to offer a job and a worker who wants to get a job. And we are asking for folks to apply for these RAMP fellowships. And for those who might be interested, we want you to go to energy.gov RAMP to learn more and apply.
All right, so listen, there are a lot more we're going to play for this. Makongo's going to handle this for me. So I have a slight technical issue that I have to fix. So Makongo, you take it away. We'll play the rest of the sound from the Vice President's visit today to Detroit, and hopefully I'll be back in about 15 minutes.
No doubt, Roland. We always got you. Julian, as we were listening to what was mentioned right now, I was taking some notes, as I'm sure we all were. And one of the things that I heard, which I feel like kind of speaks to what you were saying about people who are not always doing the entrepreneurial stuff, was that they were speaking about minimizing things as it relates to paperwork in order to increase access to opportunities to people that are on the ground, and not having to go through such rigmarole just to try to get various types of applications, whether it's for various financial assistance or whether it's for some of the economic programs for those who might be entrepreneurs. But what was your general assessment of what you were hearing in that interview with Roland?
Well, first of all, I think he made a really good point about minority business. Most minority businesses, they're solopreneurs, if you will. Mm-hmm. One person business, about 85%. One person's business. We're not very different from majority. Most small businesses are one person. And so he made that point when he spoke to the gentleman he was speaking to outside the plane. And it's something we need to pay attention to. But the other thing, and I think Jennifer Granholm actually brought my point home very clearly when she talked about how investment turns into jobs. Again, you know, I've spent a large part of my career writing minority business. I think minority business is extremely important. And there's a storied history of how we've been kept out of some entrepreneurial opportunities. So it's an important focus, but most people are not entrepreneurs, and most people are not, regardless of race, then it does not trickle down to the worker. It doesn't trickle down to a number of other things. So again, I appreciated the interview Roland had. I think that guy was with the Minority Business Development Agency. But that was a good conversation. I think that I like seeing Kamala in the Brothers Restaurant, which I've been to years ago. Great restaurant, good food. And so I liked her having the conversation. Wish we could have heard more of it, but just the interaction ought to, at some level, make people pay attention.
Yeah.
But
no,
we
absolutely.
got to, and I know Gavin, again, I'm going to push him on this, if I might, Omekongo, push Gavin as a speechwriter, as a writer. How do we connect these plans? You talked about it earlier. You said, well, it's not just that they visited Atlanta or Detroit, but groundwork goes on after that.
Yeah, I want to get to that comment. I want to get to Gavin, but before that, I just wanted to, let's hear from Julie Sue. I wanted to play her comment, the Secretary of Labor in America for Workforce Infrastructure.
Made in America is not a slogan. It's an economic strategy. And made in America means made by America's workers. We've seen this right here in Detroit. We've seen it in Michigan. We've seen it with the auto workers. Last year, through their strength and solidarity, the United Auto Workers not only reached a historic contract with 25% wage increases and improvements to health and retirement benefits, but also showed what it's like when workers have a real seat at the table. And when workers help to define the future of an industry. They show that Made in America is a strategy that benefits both American workers and American businesses, ensures that we can protect our climate while growing good union jobs, and we are here today to support a longtime iconic American industry and set us up to lead in the future by making sure we have a resilient and strong supply chain that includes small and medium-sized businesses, and where workers who make profits possible share in the prosperity. So President Biden's Investing in America agenda is about infrastructure. It's about roads and bridges. It's about modernizing airports. It's about manufacturing electric vehicle batteries. Our workforce system is also a form of infrastructure. It's the roads and bridges that connect people to the good jobs they want and need, and employers to the people that they want and need. But that infrastructure has some challenges too. It's got some cracks. It's got some potholes. It doesn't reach every single community the way that it should. Too often people hear workforce development and they just think about training. No. Black workers and other workers have been left out not because they lack the skills, but because we have not built the roads and bridges that connect all communities to the good jobs that we are creating. We have to create a situation where economic opportunity is broadly shared. And so we are going to fix that this time. We're going to do it right this time. In President Biden's and Vice President Harris's America, we are building a workforce infrastructure that connects all communities, that is the bridge from poverty to prosperity and from racial exclusion to real equity.
So, Gavin, kind of going off of what Juliana's asking, and we heard from Sue's comments as well, talking about these incredible programs, and then Dr. Marvell also talking about the messaging. We've heard in the last half hour since Roland has touched down and has been sharing these stories, so many powerful things. And throughout the show, you've been hitting some of the things that have happened as it relates to Atlanta, where this kicked off. As it relates to messaging, I have a two-part question for you. Number one, what does the Biden administration need to be doing more to get this message out? But then secondly, what is our role? Because when we see a street and we see a bridge being built, we can do the research and find out who built it. Is it all Biden's fault that we don't know? Like, what's the role of the average citizenry as well in terms of learning about what's going on as well? Two-part question for you, bro.
For sure. So I think on the first part, right, I think the administration should continue to look to partner with influencers on the ground, right? I think influencer right now carries a connotation of being like a social media sort of influencer, someone with a bunch of followers. It doesn't have to be like that. What I'm talking about are trusted voices in communities. I think mayors play a really crucial role. If you look at a lot of polling data, it suggests that Americans really trust their local government officials far more than they do their federal government officials. That means that I think, and I've written about this before actually, I believe that if the president, the VP, the other sort of leaders across the administration continue, and I say continue because they've been doing it, if they continue to partner with local trusted voices, be they mayors or nonprofit leaders, private sector leaders in communities across the country, I think that message will really resonate and will register. And then to answer the second part of your question, what can we do? Look, I think it's on us, certainly, to be tuned in as to what our government is doing to deliver for us. But I tend to put more of the onus on the government. I think it's really their job to come down and connect with voters on the ground. But I think we certainly have a responsibility to stay plugged in as to what's going on, to demand that our news media covers these stories, because the news media will cover certain stories in response to what they feel like their readers want to learn about and know about. And so I think it's on us to read those stories so that the readership and viewership numbers can suggest to the news media companies that we do care about these issues.
No, absolutely. And I feel like when we're looking at this, Julian, I feel like there's another aspect of it that needs to be discussed as well. When people are talking so much about the youth vote, right, and we're talking about economic policies that are being put in position right now, do you feel like when it comes to young people and people that you're encountering that people are even going to be looking at this as something that is, hey, this is great now, but what does this have to do with me in the future? Just kind of this microwave society mindset that we're seeing, where people are just growing impatient with what they're not seeing in front of them right now. Do you feel like this is something that can help quell those concerns?
I'm not sure. I think the youth vote is a hard nut to crack. There are many young people who are very highly motivated to vote. They get it. They're looking at the orange man. They don't feel it. And so there are lots of young people. And again, we've got a great chasm, a great class divide in terms of who is motivated and who is not. And again, I have to keep picking on Pookie. I think he's one of my cousins. But, we want to figure out how to get Pookie out to vote. Pookie at this time is either indifferent. He might be kind of leaning in either direction, but he's not keeping up with it. And so, Gavin, one of the things you said that I won't say I'll take issue with, but you said it's our responsibility. Well, whose responsibility? We know that the newspaper industry is shrinking. We're not getting the news that we used to get. We know that the media space, the internet space, is highly polarized and biased, if you will, one way or another. And so to say we, what you mean we, black man? I mean, who we are you talking about? A lot of younger people don't read newspapers. They get their news from Fox or from someplace else. But I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying we eliminated civics in our lives. What I'm saying is, I don't know what it takes to get young people involved, but we have to make that our priority. It's 8 o'clock.
We are going to definitely come back to that, because I feel like, Gavin, I know you have a lot to say on that. Let's also hear what Ron Busby Sr., President and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers Incorporated, has to say as well.
For many of us, the wealth gap has been a conversation that we have had for hundreds of years. Our black families and white families just have a huge difference between the financial wherewithal of our communities. The only way you can truly find solutions is through good policies that are intentional, transparent, and accountable. That's what today is all about. This administration is addressing these major challenges, such as reviving Main Street America post-COVID. You see, during the first 3 months of COVID, between the months of February and April of 2020, we lost 41% of all black-owned businesses. Roughly 442,000 businesses closed. And when we surveyed them, they said it was because of lack of capital and good information. This administration understood those challenges, and because of the work that they have done, over 75% of our businesses have reopened, gaining higher revenue goals than they have received in previous years. But this administration is doing more. They are also working to enhance workers' rights, reduce student loan and health care burdens, and promote affordable housing, all issues that impact the Black community at a much higher work. As I travel across America and visiting Black chambers and engaging with Black business owners, the potential I see is immense, yet often hindered by a lack of necessary resources. That's why today's visit and announcements are so pivotal. They reaffirm the commitment I've always seen in Vice President Harris and this administration to prioritize and uplift those often left behind, supporting entire communities and business sectors like the auto industry. DE&I, or what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion, are truly under attack. And let me address it in this way. It's not some mythological concept that's going on. When they talk about DE&I, it's you and I that are under attack. This is being seen across the board from private sector, public sector, including corporate America, Main Street, as well as colleges and universities, as well as federal government contracting opportunities. As these attacks continue to rise, we face threats of stifled progress towards an inclusive economy while curtailing critical innovation. As this year progresses, we are going to hear a lot about making America great again. I can say that. And I will also say that as a Black business community, we want America to be great as well. But we say in order for there to be a great America, there must be a great Black America.
And let's also hear from Vice President Harris, also speaking about economic opportunities.
I believe that America's economy is powered by the ambition and the aspiration of her people. The ambition and aspiration to innovate, to create, and to prosper. Therefore, to grow our economy, we must invest in that ambition and those aspirations. I believe every person in our country then must have access to the opportunity to compete, to succeed, and to thrive. The ability to achieve what I call financial freedom, which means having enough not just to get by, but to get ahead. To be able to build a business, to own a home, to start a family, and to create intergenerational wealth. Which is why over the past 3 years, the President and I have invested now trillions of dollars in America's infrastructure, in clean energy and a clean energy economy, in manufacturing, and in supply chains. Our work is also guided by the understanding that there are certain communities that have faced historically and currently profound obstacles to acquire that opportunity. And I'll tell you, over the last 3 years, both in the White House and at the Vice President's residence, where I live, I have convened Black entrepreneurs from around the country to solicit their advice and leverage their expertise as to how we can have the greatest impact with the billions of dollars that we are investing, and to identify the challenges they face in building financial security and wealth, including disparities in access to capital and lending, disparities in home ownership and access to government contracts, to obstacles like student loan debt and medical debt. President Biden and I have invested hundreds of billions of dollars to address these disparities. And I launched then this national tour, the Economic Opportunity Tour, to bring together entrepreneurs, business owners, and community leaders, together with representatives from the United States Departments of Commerce and Energy and Housing and Labor and Treasury and the Small Business Administration, and the Undersecretary of the SBA is with us as well, to make sure founders and families have the information and assistance to access the resources they need.
Now, During this time, Vice President Harris was also asked about the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
Well, this morning I was on the call between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu. We are closely tracking what is happening on the ground, and my team is keeping me updated. And I have nothing further at this time, but I'll keep you all posted if I have anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We'll hold right here, guys. No, we'll get back in the van.
Totally ignored that spot. Came right in.
She did. Tiff, I told her to look for you, and she did.
So folks, as you heard earlier, there was a call this morning with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well as President Joe Biden. The effort is they're trying to keep the ground operation from Rafah from happening, and so they're trying to have a ceasefire. So the question is whether or not Israel and Hamas will actually agree to that ceasefire. So that's what we're following. So we're to head back to the van. So fly back to Detroit. So again, what the effort is, they're trying to actually prevent.
This is something we are definitely going to continue to be following. While Vice President Harris was on her trip, she also had a major economic announcement that she wanted to share as well.
I am proud to announce we are investing $100 million in small and medium-sized auto supply companies, many of which are Black-owned and based right here in Michigan. These grants will allow businesses to upgrade production and production lines to produce parts for electric vehicles. I am also pleased to announce the launch of a new program that will match government-backed loans with private equity capital to help small and mid-sized auto suppliers access loans from $250,000 to $10 million. The strength of America's economy is also based on the strength of America's supply chains. We all learned that in the pandemic if we weren't clear before. This investment will help to keep our auto supply chains here in America, which strengthens America's economy overall, and keep those jobs here in Detroit.
So as we wrap up, we wanted to get some final quick comments from you both as we heard about everything that's been going on today. It's been a jam-packed day. Gavin, what are your final thoughts as it relates to what we talked about today and what we're seeing from Vice President Harris?
Yeah, so I'm just extremely excited again that this tour is happening. I think the fact that we're continuing to see this intentional engagement with Black communities across the country, whether in Atlanta or in Detroit or the cities we'll see the Vice President continue to travel to, I think it's doing the real work of engaging with communities, of educating them on the work that's going on, and ultimately activating them to get out and vote in November. And one quote that the Vice President shared with us today, she said that we all know Black entrepreneurs do not lack for ideas or ambitions, but they often lack the capital that is necessary to turn an idea into a thriving business. And so I think that perfectly encapsulates, we have a Vice President, we have a president who gets the problems facing our country, especially for so many Black folks. And Dr. Malveaux pointed out, not all Black folks are entrepreneurs, certainly not. And so the work that this administration has done to reduce costs, to create jobs, just the whole 9 yards. I'm excited to see this tour continue and to see the campaign, the administration continue to form relationships on the ground with Black folks and to partner with trusted voices to get this message out there.
Thank you. Dr. Malveaux.
I think that Gavin has said something important about trusted voices. I mean, we see something that's 30,000 feet up. You're meeting with influencers. You're meeting with the lieutenant governor. I think it's great. I'm very excited for the administration to see this economic opportunity tour get out there. But at the same time, The issue is, how does the message get down here on the ground? How do we get to young people who are not thinking about entrepreneurship, although many of them are, and I'm very excited about this generation and the fact that they don't need permission, they don't need a pass, they're just going to go do what they do. So I love that. But at the same time, in terms of the upcoming election, just a few months from now, how do we get the word out? There's got to be a all hands on deck kind of conversation. But this is indeed exciting. It's exciting, and it's also, the vice president, I watched her come out, and they asked her about the possible ceasefire, and she handled it. She can't say anything. She's the vice president. And that's, people have to keep remembering it. She's the vice president. She's not the president. That stuff has to come from the top down. This is an exciting moment for the administration. I hope that she hits some other major cities. She got to get herself to California and to LA. I know she'll do that. She's a former California senator. St. Louis, she's got to get to these places. Houston, we're not going to win Texas, but we can make a dent in Texas. And there are a lot of races, not just at the top, and that's where we have to engage our young people. It's not just at the top, it's also those bottom races from the bottom up. We got to look at city councilors, we got to look at mayors. London Breed in San Francisco is in a fight for her life, and there are many others. This is an exciting moment. I'm not going to, I'm a critic, I'm a Virgo, so we're always a little critical, but I'm not going to take away from this enthusiasm. There is enthusiasm on this tour, and there's very good information getting out there. I'll go back to Gavin, influencers, influential voices, trusted partners who are not the muckety-mucks, but the brother or sister who has a corner store and who can talk about what this means to them.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.